All right, you're about to learn about the ancient grains, how to choose them, how to use them. When most people think about the term grains, some people have a great association, a love for them. Other people, maybe try and avoid them, this idea of low carb. Well, with grains, we need to take a deeper, closer look. It's all about the quality, and certainly for every individual, then it becomes about the quantity. For you, grains might be a staple. You might really enjoy certain types of grains. Grains have been a staple throughout time in all cultures, and it's just looking at the different types. One of the things that we focus on at the Light Cellar offering are unique heirloom varieties of grains, these ancient grains, right, that have been staples throughout cultures, throughout time, that have provided a very valuable source of protein, of carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals. So let's take a look at what some of the different types of grains are, their qualities, again, how to choose them and how to use them. We know things like wheat, spelt, those different varieties. There's a lot of hybridizing that's been going on, which I think is one of the reasons why a lot of people have sensitivities to certain types of grains. Some grains have gluten. A lot of grains don't have gluten. The grains that we carry and offer in the store are the non-gluten variety. Even things like oats, right? So here's an example of a food that many people think or associate with gluten, but actually technically don't contain any gluten, but oftentimes processed in a facility of other glutinous grains like rye, like wheat, and hence you'll get that cross-contamination. So if you're really sensitive, we've chosen a source of oats that is certified to be gluten-free in that way. So, raw oats can be a fantastic food, a fantastic staple, for oatmeal, granola, this kind of thing. A friend of mine, Yarrow Willard from Harmonic Arts, oats are a staple in his house, but what he does is he'll do oatmeal and he'll have it in a savory context. He'll serve superfood oatmeal to his kids with sauerkraut and things like that on top. So get creative with your oat usage, if that's something that you choose. There are things like wild rice. This is here, again, that idea of, more that ancient heirloom genetic. It's non-hybridized. This is a wild variety, so it's wild harvested, and very, very different than all the different kinds of rices that are out there. There's so many different types of rice. We're mostly familiar with, white rice and brown rice, jasmine rice, long grain, short grain, these kinds of things. This is almost a different character, different animal. The highest protein content comes from Canada. Northern Saskatchewan, Manitoba is where this grain is found and harvested and is fantastic. So you'd cook it very much like you would a regular rice. Needs a little bit more water, a little bit longer time. And like any of these grains, and I might as well mention it here while we're talking about rice, is there's that obvious of, cooking up the pot of rice. You add your water, you add your rice. What oftentimes I'll do is I'll add a little pinch of sea vegetables, like some kelp powder as I'm cooking that rice. Other thing I really like to do is add bone broth instead of water. So if you've got a pot of broth, be it a veggie broth, be it a bone broth, even a tea broth, you can cook any kind of grain, be it rice, be it millet, be it oats, you can cook it in that tea, you can cook it in that vegetable broth, you can cook it in that bone broth, and then that gives you more depth of nutrients. So that's a really good way to go. And again, it could be, all broth or all water or a mix of the two, right? So your flavor of cooked bone broth, grain rice, you might really enjoy, but maybe it's a little strong for your child, right? I know that isn't the case of our family, so we won't do 100% wild rice cooked in bone broth. We'll do, half water, half broth. And that way we're getting in much deeper nutrition when we're cooking our rice from the broth or from the tea, whatever we cook it with. Things like amaranth, again, another kind of unique, shall we say, like heirloom type grain. And of course that word heirloom, original genetic, prized for certain characteristics, certain qualities, versus what you face in the grocery stores these days is this hybridization, right? A lot of our fruits and our vegetables, really good examples that you can relate to where, we've been breeding our fruits and vegetables, our grains for certain characteristics and qualities, for one reason or another. And sometimes that can be beneficial for health. oftentimes it ends up being not so, right? So in the case of, tomatoes, why do you go to the farmer's market? You prefer that farmer's market tomato, that one, it's like you grew it in your own garden. It's kind of red, it's funky, could have these stripes on it, could even be yellow or orange, different colors. That is what we call that heirloom genetic, right? It's a very different one than that kind of uniform, Roma or beefsteak, that have been bred for, its shippability, right? Thick skin, doesn't bruise as well, ripens easily, etc. All these different kinds of characteristics, which are great in an industrial food system, but maybe not so good in terms of nutrients and nourishment and flavor. So when we look at the grains, absolutely, there's a huge variety out there that we can begin to explore. That's not just, our standard brown rice or our, hard red wheat or soft white wheat. There's so much else out there that you can get into and explore. I think quinoa is a great example of where many of us, looking at the world of grains, alternatives to rices, additions to a good vegetarian, meal like stir fry, and looking at alternative grains, a lot of people have come across quinoa, which is a fantastic one, for that, very high protein content. You can get it in many different forms. Here we have what's called a tricolor quinoa, right? So there's white quinoa, red quinoa, black quinoa, similar to rice. There's all these different varieties. And this just happens to be a blend of those three. And again, represents, something different, something that has been revered throughout time. Central and South America, quinoa has been grown and consumed as a staple food. And us in North America and other parts of the world have kind of caught on to it and gotten interested. So quinoa is a great option. Millet, there's another one, maybe something you're familiar with as well. All these ones you can cook like a rice, and just adds that diversity to your diet. So you're getting different amino acids, you're getting different vitamins, different minerals, different input, changing up, getting that variety. So amaranth, millet, quinoa, fantastic. Another one I really like is called teff. You can use in the same way as the grains I've just mentioned, cooking them in your water, your broth, or your tea. As a grain, even as a porridge, for kind of a breakfast or a dinner. One thing I really love about teff is, which you can do with a lot of these different grains, is turn them into like a flat bread. Again, gluten-free, flatbread style, and we actually have a video on that that's quite popular. So you can check out the link right here for that teff video. It's a fantastic one. It's super empowering to be able to create your own flatbreads. Can be the base of pancakes, can be like a crepe, as a savory wrap, or as think of it like a chapati or a naan, that kind of a style where you use it as a bread to kind of pick up your curries and your other dishes that you've created. So check that one out. It's fantastic. Teff is a really, really great one. Another one you might potentially be familiar with, chia seeds, fantastic. Again, can be used like a grain in terms of a porridge. One of the ways that I like to use them is to soak it in water. Chia is what we describe as hydrophilic, meaning it loves water. And how that translates in terms of preparation is you can take 1 part chia and up to 8 parts water, and it's going to soak and absorb all that in. So I put just a couple tablespoons into the 16-ounce jar here and put it in the water. You shake it up, and then as it sits, it begins to absorb that water. So those 2 tablespoons of dried chia began to absorb that water, and it will become this nice thick gel over, 20, 30 minutes as it absorbs that water. And then it becomes this delivery system, this package of like hydration and nourishment to you. So being a complete protein, you also have omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. You have soluble fiber, as well as insoluble fiber. So that insoluble is like that roughage, but it's predominantly more that soluble fiber. So as it absorbs that moisture in that liquid, it produces this gel-like quality. Chia gel is sometimes what it's described as, and it's very soothing for the digestive tract, right? So as that gel passes through, it's a nice, gentle bulk. So if someone has, say sensitivities in their digestive system, very, very helpful for that, as that soothing bulk. that can pass through. And then also can really help with digestion, kind of a slow absorption of nutrients, and kind of a long-lasting energy. So it was said, in the cultures that revered and used chia, the Aztecs, that, their runners were able to run on a tablespoon for a day. Sounds like a bit of an exaggeration to me. I need a little bit more than a tablespoon a day for myself, but, that kind of like myth speaks to the idea of its qualities and its properties. It's kind of a long-term, high-energy food in that way, providing that deep nourishment. So it's a fantastic one to create this chia gel. You let it soak, you let it rehydrate. You can add that to smoothies to kind of give it some body, give it some nutrition, some thickness to it. Or you can create what's called like a chia pudding. And what you do there, take your chia, add your water, let it soak, rehydrate, and to that you can then add any kind of spices, any kinds of fruits, yogurt, milk, you name it, to create this pudding, which is really great. So like we were talking about substituting water when you're cooking your grains, absolutely the same thing with your chia. So instead of just water and letting it soak and rehydrate, if you want something kind of sweet, like a breakfast thing, or you're going to add it to a smoothie, you could use juice, right? So you have a base of juice, add some chia to that, let it soak and rehydrate. There's some companies that are producing drinks with chia and kombucha, right? So you get that benefits of chia and its properties, but also within a fermented beverage. I'll often add milk. Could be dairy milk or an alternative like nut and seed milk. Add chia to that, let it soak and rehydrate, and it almost creates this Indian, kheer, like rice pudding type quality. Add some cinnamon, some raisins, some cardamom, and you have a fantastic, dessert or kind of breakfast or any kind of snack or meal just by doing that. So lots of fun with chia, lots of variations and how you can use that. There's so much in the world of grains. Again, these ancient grains, these heirloom grains. Think back to, what have other cultures incorporated and used as a staple, and how can you begin to access those, play with those? You'll come up with your own preferences. Maybe you'll really love quinoa, or you prefer millet, your child just loves amaranth. Who knows? As a porridge, as a grain, or even, grinding it to a flour, like in the Teff video, if you check that out, fermenting it, turning it into flatbreads. So much you can do. Again, when you're cooking them, think about the different alternative types of liquids you use as a base. As you cook them, add in things like little bits of sea vegetables or culinary mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms. These just little infusions where you're just kind of upgrading the nutrition as it cooks as a base. And then when you're ready to serve them, prepare them. Obviously, there's so many different ways to do that. One of my favorites is adding like tahini and miso, a little like soy sauce and some vegetables on top. That's one way to do it. I know Denis, who works at the Light Cellar, absolutely loves this idea of adding maca or mesquite. So you got your grain, maybe cook up your quinoa, and then you stir in like a tablespoon of mesquite or a tablespoon of maca, a little bit of oil, a little bit of salt, your veggies on top, and that's a fantastic way to consume it as well. So enjoy the world of the ancient grains, explore, get that diversity, try them out in all different kinds of contexts. Add your different, nutrients like sea vegetables, like the mushrooms, other superfood powders to kind of upgrade and increase the nutrition, and enjoy.